Now the batter is mixed. The next step is to prepare the pan. And I'm using a 9 by 2 inch, which is a kind of standard cake pan for a 1-layer cake. And if you want to turn this into 2 layers, you can cut it in half because you get nice height. So since chocolate is notoriously sticky and likes to stick to the cake pan, I like to prepare the pan really well. First doing a layer of shortening that will hold the parchment in place. And then I grease and flour it, or I spray it with a spray that has the grease and the flour in it. Now don't forget that it's not just the shortening or the oil that's going to keep it from sticking. It's the flour. And if you don't want to go to the trouble of decorating the sides of a cake with buttercream, you're really better off using flour so that you get a nice sealed-in side crust. Because there's nothing really more beautiful than seeing the chocolate cake itself without having to cover it up. Covering up mistakes is what happens a lot of times in baking. Now this is not strictly necessary, but another nice little trick is using what's called Magi cake strips. They remind me of the ironing board covers, you know, the padded ones where you have this non-stick on the outside and the cloth on the inside. And you soak it in water, and this keeps the outside of the pan cool so that it bakes a little slower than the center. Because you know, whatever batter is up against the side of the pan is going to be the part that bakes the first, because the metal conducts the heat. And then wrap the pan. And usually these come with a little straight pin, but you can use anything you want, up to a point too. You can use a paper clip, something that you can put, it's oven proof, that you can put in the oven. But if you have the straight pin, it's quick and easy. And now this is ready. I always wipe off the top with a little towel because that way it doesn't bake and get gummy on the top of the pan. And just pour the batter in. And doesn't this kind of look like buttercream? It's so thick. Well, a thin batter makes a very compact cake. The thick batter means that it doesn't, all those little microscopic pores of the cake structure are going to be able to open up and make a really light, soft cake. A thin batter means there's lots of liquid, it fills them up, and you know how a devil's food cake is really very moist. It's a different style of cake. And it fills the pan about half full. And that's going to rise about double the height. If it were a wet batter, it wouldn't rise as much because the water would bog it down. That's what makes it more compact. So with this style of cake, you don't want it to fill more than half full because it will rise above. And you know, rising above is not a good thing unless it's a souffle, because what happens is if it rises too much, it drops down, it collapses, it can't support its own weight. Now this is going to bake in a preheated 350-degree oven for 30 to 40 minutes until it tests done. I have here the cake that I made earlier. And you can see that this one did not underbake. This one overbaked a tiny bit because it's already come away from the sides of the pan. That means it will be a little bit drier, but it will still be delicious. The only thing bad that can happen to a chocolate cake is if it starts burning. Just to be sure, though, I'll take a spatula and run it around the sides of the pan. You don't have to take off the Magi cake strip at this point. Just leave it in the pan. I like to grease the rack so that it doesn't stick to it, and have a serving plate all ready. And chocolate cake, unlike yellow cake, is delicious eaten warm, especially with a scoop of ice cream. So just flip it out. And the parchment actually stuck to the pan, so we don't have to worry about peeling it off. That happens a lot. It's fine. The point is to get it off. And this is the bottom. Okay, with one deft motion, flip it over. You can see how it's gently rounded. That's just perfect. And it's ready to be served. Although I do like to decorate it with cocoa. Chocolate cake and cocoa look very attractive together because the cocoa is lighter, and after all, the cocoa is in it, so it's perfectly appropriate. And if you should develop a crack, which occasionally happens, I mean, ovens sometimes misbehave, you can put a rose, you can put a daisy, you can put a flower right on the top, or decide that you're going to slice it and it will be just great anyway. And if you like, you can add a tiny bit of powdered sugar because it gives it a little bit more life too. I like to cut a chocolate cake with a sharp serrated knife. Some serving tart knives have a serrated edge to them, and it makes it easier to cut. I can tell how soft it is the way it sinks in. You can tell a lot about a cake just by touching it. This slices beautifully, so I don't need to have a serrated bread knife, but I often use those for cakes. And of course, what is better with a chocolate cake than raspberries and whipped cream, or raspberries and ice cream? When you whip cream, make sure it's softly whipped. In fact, when it sits for a while, it's sometimes a little runny, but that's fine because even if you were to put a puddle of melted ice cream as a sauce, you know, ice cream really is crème anglaise, is a cream sauce, frozen. And when it's made with eggs, it's particularly rich and delicious. But over-whipping cream ruins the texture and ruins the taste. In fact, if you really over-whip cream, it becomes butter. And we want butter on bread, not on cake. Look what a great texture there is in this cake. It's fine and even. There are no big holes. It's gently rounded on the top. That's what happens when you pay strict attention to the temperature. Not too hot, not too cold. And you get this, the great American chocolate torte.